Welcome, everyone. My name is Eddie Arrieta, president here at Publicize, and you are listening or viewing Digital PR for Startups, why 2019 is year zero. For those who are not familiar with who we are, who I am, or even what we do, Publicize was founded about 5 years ago by Conrad Agusa, former venture beat writer, and our initial objective was to deconstruct the PR process in a way that could be scaled to startups from all around the world. Um, to date, we have worked with hundreds of startups and consulted with thousands, helping them understand what drives their audiences and what a compelling story looks like. Some housekeeping before we continue. So this webinar is being recorded. So if you'd like a copy and you register to this webinar, you will likely be receiving a copy of it. If you have any questions along the way, please type them on the chat to the right-hand side. And if you'd like to know how these will all apply specifically to your startup, company, or organization, please stick around and I will be answering specific questions at the end of this session. So on this webinar, we'll be covering why conventional wisdom in PR is on its way out, what are the building blocks of a watertight digital PR strategy, and how your content can support it. How strong digital PR strategy can form the backbone of your growth plan, and the latest trend and potential stumbling blocks to look out over the next year. So let's get started by pointing out some information about the obvious things. So PR companies have not been considered the nice guys of the marketing world. In fact, most people would think of PR companies as expensive, deceiving, even superficial, and there is some truth as well as misconceptions around this perception. You must be familiar with the classic definitions of PR, where we understand that being strategic about communications is key to building long-term relationships with our publics, which has historically been differentiated from advertising, of course, where sometimes you pay, sometimes you don't pay, and this is the main difference. But the reality is that we are experiencing a new era for PR and everyone needs to pay attention. So let's take a look at how this has played out. PR has traditionally only made sense to massive corporations who can afford the services of high-end agencies, and this is no secret. There are companies with a communications department of one form or another, marketing, internal PR, etc. Companies who have their general approach to communications predefined, predetermined with brand guidelines, who just need a PR company to consult with on specific areas or campaigns and to execute their requirements. The core difference between this type of PR and startup PR is that startups don't have an internal communications team. Even marketing teams tend to be more focused towards various forms of lead generation than even true PR. This to you probably would resonate with most of the startups that we work with or have consulted with on the daily basis. We get founders pitching us a bunch of tactics that are being executed or that they are planning to execute with no real strategy, with no direction. There is only this hope that you will get this link on a specific publication, and this will translate into millions of paying users. And well, things have changed, and conventional PR wisdom for startups is definitely on its way out. Of course, the old conventional approach is still being used, and you can all probably guess what this looks like. But let me give you a bit more context. Because of the execution-based focus of PR, people often feel like the success of sending out a press release is contained in the method of sending out that press release. So follow steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and voila. This is no longer the case. Everything that the world previously knows about you contributes to the success of that press release. So guess what happens when you follow these steps? Well, really nothing will happen. And this is different when big brands make an announcement. Everyone listens because they are big, or at least it looks like most have something valuable to say. So if Apple launches something, everybody's going to listen. If nobody knows you, then probably nothing is going to happen. For lesser known brands, and this is what we're talking about, if a journalist receives a press release, the first thing that they'll probably do is Google the company, Google the founder. If they don't find anything, their likelihood of writing that press release is significantly decreased. Startups need to work on building their existing media footprint. And doing this is strategically, always looking at the why when executing a campaign and circling back to how media exposure can help the company achieve its long-term goals. So that the announcements intended to have an impact can have that impact. So this means we need to get our basics right. We're talking about every aspect that gives you a coherent, a consistent footprint. So let me give you an example. Something as simple as getting your website up and running with a coherent message is a basic step companies are not taking right now. You'd be surprised with the number of startups that have not even run a basic SEO assessment of their site and are not even ready to engage a discussion on their industry or how they are even disrupting it. We need to get, or we don't need to rather get philosophical here. All we need is to build an initial footprint. We need your story. But beyond this, there are some core elements you will need to cover. For example, do you know who your target audience is? And does this differ from your ideal audience? What are your current business objectives? Have you crafted a coherent story about your company? Because once you create a coherent story that people care about, it becomes the backbone of the business and the hook for attracting new audiences. If you are able to answer, these questions, you probably would be able to not only follow steps 1, 2, and 3, but also understand how any activity you perform translates into your audience's understandings of what you do, and then probably believe you and use your product or service. You are building an audience, you are engaging with them, you are growing with them. So craft a coherent message, aim at your target audience, start there, make sure it's coherent, make sure it's consistent, and that is your footprint. So we need to rethink this whole scenario. To most, PR is a mysterious discipline. Something called a press release is sent to someone who might or might not write about it, and how to get what anyone wants out of this situation is a bit of a mystery. Everyone will say exactly what they want writers to do for them. I want you to write this amazing thing about my company. But the reality is that the only ones that decide what's going to be published is the writers, is the editors, is the publications. This leads to a situation where companies tend to just put a lot of pressure on the PR firms, on anybody who is responsible on the announcement. And given that progress without results can easily be interpreted as the only way to guarantee they are getting bang for the buck with PR companies, it's to take this approach of show me a few links, show me a few things that are there, and we are achieving our goals. To be honest, this means nothing. So let me give you another example. Let's say you reach out to 100 writers and 5 of them cover your story. Great, that's fantastic. Well, not entirely. Part of your understanding of your audience and your business goals should translate into an understanding of how results translate into growth. So those 5 links that you got, how do they translate into growth? This approach of only looking into links won't work for startups. Because big companies need PR firms to execute, their communications departments can manage their communication strategy. Whereas for startups, the strategy and the results need to be done as a whole. So this means we need a new approach. We need a mental shift to understand what can be achieved. So let's understand something basic about PR. Because big companies have a communications department, they can mix their PR efforts between marketing, advertising, and PR. So PR companies can operate on a specific set of tasks. But the term PR for a startup should cover everything: press releases, press conferences, and in this case, guest articles, announcements, video, podcasts, special pitches, blog management. Any story or message coming from you and directed to an audience is PR. And each of these can constitute an individual effort, as long as each of these efforts is not eating up the other activities that you're running. When all the individual efforts are put together and are strung together, we can then create a plan, and this plan can stretch into the future with an ever-building media footprint and impact announcements built in, so that they all work together for your overall and overarching objectives. This means, as a startup, you can work on a campaign by campaign basis using your resources on a per unit basis, while also tackling some of the broader problems which a full communications department would usually deal with. Now, remember how we talk about crafting a coherent message? Well, once the startup's story is defined, creating a media footprint becomes more meaningful. It becomes less about short-term results like web traffic and shares, and over time more about conversions. It becomes more about brand recognition and overall reputation. Now, the trick here is making sure that the expertise of your team, the level of thought put into communications or the communications strategy, and the mechanisms of execution are all working in complete harmony. So how do we get an effective strategy? Well, you need to understand the heart of your business. Let's get started with a few of those questions. So who are you as an entity, and what drives you? What is your purpose and direction? What is the problem that you need to solve? What is the why? What is the end result for the consumer? You should move away from being the company that says, we want to understand our business, to become the company that says, we need to understand our business. You can, of course, then look at what objectives you want to achieve over the next 6 or 12 months. How much do you want to grow? What areas of your business need development? How do you want to be seen? Who is the ideal customer versus, the current buyer persona? For this to work, you need to work backwards to the individual campaigns and efforts that would be required to achieve all of that. So let's say you build a 6-month, a 12-month plan out of the core components. And from these core components, you can make sure that those daily, weekly, and monthly efforts are really driving towards an overall strategy. Now, throughout the creation of a communications strategy, it's key. It's very, very important that the consistency, and authenticity of the brand shines throughout all the public-facing materials. After all, you are talking to people. You're talking to real humans. They don't just buy your product. They buy your story, and they only do that once a level of trust has been built up. So great, we have a story. We have a strategy, and we don't care about links. So now what, Eddie? Ultimately, this needs to translate into results. You come to this webinar, and all you're asking is, fantastic. Everything you're saying sounds great. How do we get more results? How do we get on big media? And this is very interesting, because our understanding of results to this point should have already been changed. You should be thinking about results in a different way. Results are not links. Links are just links. Results should translate into growth if they are meaningful. Links should translate into growth if they are meaningful. They should translate into visibility that matters. PR is for growth. As an example, there is no point in having features on all top publications in the world, and then that's all you need to grow. I could name a few examples, which I'm not going to do right now, of companies that we've worked with that believe that all they needed was this one feature on Forbes, this one feature on the Wall Street Journal. And then once they got that feature, the company didn't take off. All you need is not only links. If there is anything we have learned in 2018, is that the transformation of the PR industry is already underway. Audiences today are smarter than ever. They know what they want, and it is your job as a founder, as a CEO, as a marketing professional, as a CMO, to figure out and ensure that you have a story that connects with that audience in a meaningful way. If you don't start now, it might be too late. And step number one will be to recognize the long-term approach of PR, which can be achieved by using your resources intelligently. Ideally, you would probably consider a unit-based communications strategy, which can be delivered to your startup at scale and drive growth. So take a look at this. Intif is and I think Intif is a company that has managed to build a compelling story using these principles. So we focus on creating a coherent story with Intif and using those themes and their expertise to create guest articles, special pitches, announcements to call the attention of writers across several publications. Interestingly enough, most of our success came from value content that was aligned with the Intif story. If you look at the slide that I'm sharing right now, 85% of the results that we got from them were from guest articles. This is value content that was out there. So from the 33, around publications that we got around the globe, these were mostly guest articles, value content that we got for this company. In 2019, the work that we do and the work that you should do needs to be focused on what works, and what works for each company really is going to depend on the answers to the questions that we have presented throughout the webinar. So let me go over some of the questions that we had initially so that you can remember some of this. So when you are thinking about this content, you need to be, number one, identifying your target audience, crafting a compelling story, and then strategize a long-term plan, and then measure beyond links and superficial metrics. We can be talking here about written content. We can be talking here about guest articles or announcements, or we can talk about video and podcasts for audiences, maybe with higher engagement. We can specify the use of newsletters, but this is going to depend on the specifics of your company. And I, of course, understand how this can be overwhelming to begin with. We are a startup ourselves, and we understand how creating a strategy for 2018 can be truly, truly intimidating. And maybe with this list, you probably don't even know how to get started. And that's why we have opened up this chat, we have opened up this webinar to start responding or answering to some of the questions that companies can have. And ideally for us as well, we are going to be opening up a limited number of free consultations throughout this week and next week for those of you who are interested. So we're going to be putting the link on the chat to the site. But I want to be opening up the session for questions. We have gone over some of the basics on PR, some of the basics on what our thinking is as a company about PR, and that can be summarized in some of the topics on some of the points that I outlined here. So identify your target audience, craft a compelling story, strategize a long-term plan, and make sure or measure beyond links and superficial metrics. So I'm going to be looking into some of the questions that are there. For those of you that want that free consultation that I've been talking about, the link is there in the presentation, but I believe we have already one question. So let me see if, yep. So some of you couldn't see the presentation, but I presume that's fixed right now. When you're talking, Barbara Hussain, you were talking about prototypes. Could you specify a little bit more what you mean by prototypes? I want to take the chance to say hi to Mark Custodio from Parallel 18. Thank you so much for taking the time. So we have one question from Rosa. What length of time should a PR strategy cover, and how did you determine this? This is a very, very good question. And let me give you some context about how this has played out for us. Initially, we had thought that if you just go month to month with a PR strategy, that's okay. You just do 1 month of an announcement and that it's okay. Really, what we have learned over time is that the longer and the more thought we put into our story, the more thought we put into our message, the bigger the longer that strategy will look like. So that PR strategy should cover at the bare minimum, and this is something that we talk to our clients about, the bare minimum is 6 months. And it might sound a bit excessive for startups, but to begin with, this is where we need to get going in terms of our strategy. We need to figure out what the next 6 months are going to look like, and what are some of those unit-based efforts that we need to put in place. And those might look like written content. We're talking guest articles. Those might look like a video content or audio content in the form of podcasts or in any other forms. But ideally, if you are thinking of your PR strategy, start thinking about what the next 6 months will look to you in terms of announcements and what your audience is probably looking for in terms of content. There is another question. So most common mistakes startups make with PR. I think that the most common mistake, and we've seen this with some of our companies, the most common mistake that startups make with PR is thinking that the sooner they can get something out, the better. And that is one. So they don't think about the message. They just think any message would do. And no, any message would not do. Another big mistakes that that companies make regarding PR is going to be related to their understanding of what a result would mean. And this is key, because if you think that all you need is a link, mostly you will be thinking that all you need is to pay for that link. So you will go ahead and buy, 10 links or buy articles and then put those articles online, and you will think that that's what's going to make a difference. The reality is that if nobody is reading those articles, it will not make a difference. If those articles are not targeting your main audience, it's not going to make a difference. If you have no way of understanding how your message translates to your audience and how that creates some sort of reaction from them, then you will not be approaching PR right. So I'd say that common mistakes and those common mistakes can be solved by simply thinking harder about what your company does and thinking harder about the story that you are presenting. So there is a question from new startup company prototype ideal definition. I'm going to go with what I think you will be asking, Barbara. In terms of the prototype, for a writer, for a publication, a prototype needs to be something that's actually working. If you send a press release with a PowerPoint, and if you say just an image, prototype or landing page with nothing that can be played with, then writers will not consider that a prototype. So for a new startup or a company, when you are looking to present a prototype or an MVP to a publication or to a writer, that's actually working, something that probably beyond a beta. If it's an internal or private beta, then perhaps you can share that with those publications. But other than anything that's working, a prototype would not be considered a prototype if it's not actually working. So what, and this is another question, what are the publications should you put the most effort into? Industry specifics or mass market? Really, really good question. Because I think the first thing that we need to recognize is that we cannot satanize mass media publications. We cannot satanize major publications or large publications. They are important. We all would agree that if you get a link on from the New York Times, it's going to mean something to your company. If you get a link from Forbes, it's going to mean something to your company. The reality is that large media are still important, and you will need to aim for those. But learned in the past few years is that industry-based publications are much more powerful than people think. Industry-based publications and niche publications give you a level of authenticity, a level of recognition that goes beyond what a major publication could give you. If you have industry-based leaders and industry-based experts looking to articles about your industry, talking about you within those publications, it goes a really, really long way. To give you a quick example, we've had companies, and I'm not going to say names just to make sure everything stays fine. We have companies featured on TechCrunch and major publications. And even though that was great and there were some spikes in traffic, there were no actual clients coming out from those publications. One of our clients was featured on a publication that you can consider small, InfoQ. This same client had been featured on a TechCrunch article before, and he did get clients from InfoQ and no clients for TechCrunch. With that said, TechCrunch, it's a good publication for certain companies like Publicize. When we became Publicize and when we launched, our understanding of our industry and our understanding of our audience was that they would be where startups read, and startups read TechCrunch. When we went to TechCrunch, we got 20 clients from the first article when we were published. So I'd say it was going to depend on which publications really target your audiences and how those publications will definitely answer to that call of your story and that story getting to your audiences. So Rafael has a question and says, how to make PR work more tangible, especially in the press, since page views and valuations are not exactly concrete data of the results obtained. So I'm going to try to understand this question. So let me just look at it again. So how to make PR work more tangible, especially in press, since page views and valuations are not exactly concrete data. Yep. And this is a really good question as well, because even if you get 1,000 people reading your article, even if you get links and shares especially, and even if there are many comments on that article, that doesn't mean that this is tangible. I think to make PR work more tangible, what we need to recognize is what we've been talking about, which is that your audience is in very specific places, and if that audience is reading your story, it will need to translate into growth. PR is tangible as long as it brings growth. And that growth, it's going to come from that reaction of your very specific audience. And you'd say, okay, great, Eddie, what is growth? Growth is more users. Growth is more people buying your product. Growth is more people understanding what you actually do, believing what you do, and buying that product from you because they believe what you're doing. So the way to make PR more tangible is to have PR be a direct, let's say a direct cause of the growth of the company. And we will need to change this mindset. PR is not this cherry on top. And this is great because someone in the team mentioned this earlier. PR is not this cherry on top that you have for all of your company's strategy. So it's like, oh, we're doing something great in terms of marketing, sales, and then let's just do PR so we can get this great article and get these vanity links that make us look great. That is not why PR is valuable. PR is valuable for many different reasons. And I would say the two top reasons why PR would be valuable is, number one, because it will bring growth to you. And number two, because it will validate your product. It will validate your service and it will validate your company. Marise Cameron says, what's a good length for a pitch and how do you follow up in an efficient way? Another good question. And the length of the pitch is going to, of course, be determined by the information that you have to share. But generally speaking, we do not spend large amounts of text into explaining everything that the company has to say. We make the pitch as short as potentially possible, but at the same time, as short as we could do it to still make it attractive. So that the length will vary, and I wouldn't be able to tell you, do 300 words, do 500 words, but definitely the shorter, the sweeter, and as to the point as possible, the better that it would be. In terms of follow-ups, there are a few people that would say that just follow up until they break and until they respond to you, and definitely that's something that has served in the past, and we did it at a certain point as a company, but a few follow-ups would be enough. We are considering right now, anywhere between 2 to 3 follow-ups would be more than enough. And if there are no answers after that, stop spamming people. That's just what it is. We have another questions here. So from Hani says, what story does media like? So that's a tough question because it has many ways to be answered. The stories that the media like are normally going to be determined by what's happening right now. So you would say that there are a few different ways of looking into it. I would say whatever is going on at the time. And if you're doing media monitoring, and media monitoring, for those that don't know, media monitoring is you're looking into the news for your industry. You're looking into what your competitors are doing. And if there's something happening, then you can reach out to publications. Or if a writer is looking to write an article on those topics, then that's what will be attractive to media at the time. So for example, if we're talking about AI, and this past year, blockchain and AI had been huge. So if that's what's happening in media, then after your media monitoring, then that will make sense for you to, in terms of considering that as an attractive thing for media. For media, also something that's attractive is anything that's disrupting markets. And earlier we were talking to a few team members as well about this, and we were saying anything that can show that is disrupting an industry, and anything that can show that is significantly different from what's out there will be attractive to media. One of the main questions we ask our clients and the people that we work with is, okay, who are your competitors? What are you doing? And how is that different from what they are doing? And it is amazing to see so many people believing that they are different, but yet doing the same that everybody else is doing. There is no way media will be attracted to what you're doing if you are a copycat. There is no way. And there is no way that you will be attracted to an industry-based publication if you're not talking about something that is attractive to that industry. And what's attractive to that industry is something that's disrupting it, something that's valuable to the audiences that are reading it. And where this argument will go from here on. See, we have other questions here. Is there any other question I haven't read here? Why should a startup use digital PR instead of, for example, social media marketing? Or should we use both? And we shouldn't think, I guess, about digital PR as this thing that it's one thing that we do in the company and then everything else is on the other side. Digital PR is the backbone of everything we do within the company. And the reason why it's the backbone is because everything that we do, every content that we create, everything that we put out there will be shared by people, will be read by people, and will tell people what we are all about. So if we think that PR is just something separate to social media, or that is separate to our sales activities, then we're going to run into a few issues of coherence. We won't have a coherent or consistent message, and we will run into problems with the people that come to use our products because they might not be able to understand what we do. So the answer to this is you shouldn't think of it as something or one or the other, but think of PR and digital PR specifically as the backbone of everything you're doing. So your social media marketing needs to be related to what you have been talking about with your digital media or your digital PR strategy. And that digital PR strategy will lead and will translate into the different strategies that you have for other departments. So let me see, what other questions are we missing here? As a startup, how can I craft a PR strategy if I don't have anything new to announce at the moment, but I still want to increase my chances of earning media? So how can I craft a PR strategy if I don't have anything new to announce? Historically, and to give some context on this question, historically, companies have thought that PR is only writing press releases and putting those press releases out there. The reality is that there are many other ways of getting published. With our clients, what we have done is, in media, we think about the potential of writing guest articles, the potential of creating value content for different publications. Let me give you a very specific example. If you are a company in the gaming industry and all you do year long is announce that you are launching your games once a quarter, then you'll think, okay, that's the only thing I can do. Once a quarter, I'm just going to release the game. But the reality is your CEO, your CTO, your COO, and every leader in the company that's helping create these games can talk about the gaming industry, can talk about the future of the gaming industry, can talk about how your games and your approach to the industry, it's changing that industry. That is valuable. So if I want to get content, and if I want to get traction, and if I want to get, publications outside of these press releases that I normally putting out, what I will do will be to create value content that will go on major publications or niche publications. Added to this, you will have to think of what are those building blocks that would help you as a startup, get more visibility. Some of those could be guest articles. Some of those could be, of course, your announcements, but you need to be thinking of, can we do video? Can we do podcasts? Can we do events? And events will need to be hacked in a different way, because events are not only speaking at a major conference. Events could be very specific alternative engagements, like being present at a podcast, doing a conversation, or doing a presentation at a co-working space, doing a mentoring session for startups, or doing a mentoring session for gamers, if you are the gaming company I was talking about. So that is all PR. Anything that will and should be related to your public in terms of content for them to absorb. Let's see how many other questions do we have here. So, Gabor, do you suggest run A/B test for the pitch and or the press release? If you have the capabilities using different email software, this is something that you could do. You could A/B test the subject line. You could test the text, but this is going to be much more difficult for someone that doesn't have the expertise. If you have the expertise to do this and A/B test, then you can do it. At the same time, who are you reaching out to? Are you going to be reaching out to 1,000 writers? That's something that probably I wouldn't recommend. In general, we're reaching out to something 20, 30, 50 writers, 100 writers, and to do an A/B test with those numbers might be difficult. I would say if you have those capabilities, just go ahead and do it. We're looking into other questions. So Ben is asking, could you give us an example of how you've used the building blocks of PR that you've referred to build a strategy over time? When we have talked to our clients, and I already made that reference that in the beginning we were not doing this. When we've talked to clients and when we're talking to clients now, something or what we are doing is we look at their core message. We look at the story that we are trying to pursue, and with that, then we look at month to month, what are some of the things that we could be doing for them. And if we are to put it in very specific terms, you will look at the next 6 months, and we will say for month 1, we're going to be working on a guest article. And that guest article is going to be related to a topic on your industry. At the same time, we're also going to be working on another building block. The building block is going to be blog management. So for blog management on month 1, we're going to be doing your SEO assessment. So we assess what your content looks like within your site and whether or not it's optimized. Then month 2, you will look into writing blog content for your website, and at the same time looking into potentially working with another one of those building blocks, like press releases or announcements, if you want to put it in that way. And then month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, and all of those months, you will be playing with those around in a way that you can achieve whatever overarching goal you have. If you want to think about it in a different way, you can think about it as potential activities and potential blocks that you could be using month to month to achieve that goal. So if you have lots of resources, you can have 6 of this. If you have lots of resources, you can have 10 of this. If you don't have many resources, you can start with 2 of this. You can start working on a guest article in the first month and an announcement on the subsequent months. Then you can be working on blog management and a podcast, or you could be working into video. The idea is that over time, you could be adding these building blocks to your strategy, not just doing 2, but doing 3, doing 4, etc. Marco asks, how do we get space? If there are, by the way, if there are any questions that you feel are unanswered, please just let me know, and I will elaborate on those. So Marco is asking, how do we get space for our opinion content on publications? Is this viable to offer our content? Marco, this is exactly what we're talking about, and it is absolutely acceptable. the way to get into those and the way to get that space is to have valuable content. Of course, this is as well going to determine by the form. And I mean, by the form, I mean how it's written. If it's not well written, then you're going to have a big barrier there. That's going to be the first filter. Is it well written or not? And number two, is that content valuable? My recommendation with this would be, instead of writing something that's really long and you spent a lot of time writing, think about the outline. Think about what is the topic that will make that publication that you're writing for accept that content, and not only accept that content, but consider it important for its audience. And once you have gotten that outline and said to that writer or the editor of that publication, if they are interested and they are interested, then you can start writing that. So the quick answer is create valuable content and then reach out to the editors of the publications that could publish that content. Another quick answer could be, if you are not a contributor right now to publications, try to find a way to become a contributor. Most publications today and in the foreseeable future will open up their publications to content from the outside. Now, not many writers and not many companies have realized this. And by the time they realize it, there will be huge competition. So there is some added value into getting started with this as soon as possible. And that's why one of our main building blocks for our PR strategies for our clients is guest articles, is creating content and helping them become contributors to the largest publications around the world. So Rafael says, so has another question. Marco, if I didn't answer your question, please let me know. Rafael, so if PR is more tangible by seeing the growth, what are the metrics should I follow, since not always is possible to get a link in a press result, even online, to check through an analytics tool? If the audience is growing, what about leads? Not always is possible to measure if a lead came from a press result. I think over time, we're going to get much better at measuring where we are getting those leads and where those leads and whether or not those leads are actually becoming clients. But over time, what you'll realize is that the compounded value of PR will be very evident. The narrative that you are sharing should become evident in the types of clients that you're getting. So the quick answer from me on this is, first, if you didn't get a link out of a PR push, there is nothing to be measured there. If you actually get a link, then there will be something to be measured on. Your Google Analytics should tell you if that article that you got on these niche publications is resulting into actual results or not. Something else that you need to consider is that when you are thinking of PR as something tangible, you will also think that your PR activities are not only going to be determined by this one article or this one press release. You're going to be doing guest articles. You should be doing blog management. You should be doing video content. You should be doing audio content. And all of these, that's giving you visibility, because any PR that you're doing, any activities that you're doing that are giving you visibility, and that need to create or generate something. And as they are generating something, it will be evident on your Google Analytics. And there should be a way for you to measure that, at least with those Google Analytics. And if you are not yet doing that, then you should activate that. And if you're not doing that through social media, then you should do that. And if you're not using a newsletter yet, then you should use that newsletter and see how your audience would react to that. Let me see. Any more questions around here? Let me see if I missed any of the questions from the top. Okay, everybody, I have, as you can see from the presentation, we have gopublicize.co/consultation Eddie. And that is the link to a free consultation, so we can get very specific on your company. We've talked a lot about general strategy. We've talked a lot about my opinion on general strategy as well as PR. But if what you are looking for is very specific details on what a consultation would look like, or to be more clear, more specific details on how a PR strategy will look like for your company, I will be doing this for free next week. So go to the link that we have just shared on the chat, and I just did that. And once you do that, click on that link, set up a consultation, and we will talk next week about PR. We will talk about your strategy and your specific company. Please make sure to think about what I've talked about. Think about a new approach to PR and how we can achieve bigger and larger results for you. If there are no questions or no more questions, rather, I'm going to call this session to an end. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. If you want to share this link once again, we'll be sending you the recordings of it. And if you have any friends that would like to use this, please send them the link. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And until the next opportunity. Bye-bye.